Sponge on the Run, the third in this long line of SpongeBob movies dating back to 2004, and boy, it sure has been a bumpy ride. I looked at the first movie for popular vote and I still find myself enjoying it to this day. The second movie, not as good, but still fairly enjoyable with what it had going for. The third movie? One of the worst handled things I have ever seen. Oh, that doesn't mean the movie was one of the worst. I mean, how Paramount actually handled it during the pandemic is almost depressing. Constant delays, removal from theaters, and just gets dumped on Netflix in November. But it did get a theatrical release in Canada, so the rules still apply. I might have cared about that more if this movie was anything special, but it isn't. I honestly didn't expect to dislike this movie as much as I did, but somehow Nickelodeon did it. Remember when I said Wonder Park was a bad movie? Yeah, I don't find it as bad anymore after seeing this. In this movie, SpongeBob is enjoying his life as ever, hanging out with Patrick, bothering Squidward, frying up Krabby Patties at the Krusty Krab, and spending time with his pet snail Gary. But one day, Plankton realizes that SpongeBob is the reason why he can't obtain the Krabby Patty formula, so kidnaps Gary and sends him to a kingdom. That sounds familiar. SpongeBob thinks his snail's gone missing. That sounds familiar. So he and Patrick embark on a road trip to try and obtain— that sounds familiar! Okay, so I may as well address the elephant in the room. A problem so blatant as it was an issue I thought I'd be having back when I saw the trailers, is that there's hardly anything original about it. The plot is literally just the first SpongeBob movie and the season 4 episode, Have You Seen This Snail? I don't care if SpongeBob's been running out of ideas for the past decade. If the second movie can pull off something unique at the very least, then I don't think that excuses a reused story for this new fancy movie. Not to mention them even copying the same gags and plot points from the first SpongeBob movie. Not just the fact that SpongeBob and Patrick go on a road trip because of some big quest that might as well be padded out at worst, but the fact that the villain is just King Neptune with an even worse motive, and how Keanu Reeves shows up at one point to help SpongeBob and Patrick, sort of like how David Hasselhoff did. But all the stuff that's familiar is so much better in where they originated from. I don't think Have You Seen This Snail is a great episode, but at least it did a better job at the more emotional moments and went through great lengths to show just how much Gary means to SpongeBob. Here, it's mostly just glossed over or not treated too seriously, almost like it's expecting us to get emotional just because of our connection to the characters. Except I stopped caring about SpongeBob years ago, so why should I start caring now? I know, I've gone on record saying that a predictable or unoriginal story isn't a bad thing as long as the movie itself is fun and enjoyable. How to Train Your Dragon pulled this off fine, but that's another case where Sponge on the Run falls down on. It just has nothing fun to offer. Some parts feel like pandering to kids, like when Snoop Dogg makes a cameo just to be hip and serve not much else, while other parts just come off as lame and unfunny. Especially that stupid montage of SpongeBob and Patrick gambling, because I guess Gary isn't that important to SpongeBob, so he just turns into a gambling lunatic. They also do this really stupid fourth wall joke where SpongeBob predicts that he and Patrick are gonna fight later on and become stronger than ever. They do that fight right afterwards, and then they do it again later on in the movie, for literally no reason. They just forget about it and pretend it never happened. It doesn't add anything, doesn't make us learn anything new, it's really just there for the sake of a really forced joke. I don't care how funny Keanu Reeves was in this movie, I can get that exact same experience from the first movie and better. It doesn't help that he shows up way too much in this movie, and they even take out the joke that it's literally Keanu Reeves talking to SpongeBob. They just made him a fictional character but still use his live action face. That's kind of missing the point of the joke, guys. On top of that, Sponge on the Run is worthless. It already proved its point of not needing to exist by copying elements from past episodes and movies, but when it comes down to it, it feels like the least movie of the trilogy, because the first two movies had a reason to exist. The first one was meant to be the conclusion to the series and provided an important message about growing up and accepting responsibilities. The second film told a good story about friendship and teamwork that was backed up by beautiful animation. With Sponge on the Run, aside from the animation style looking absolutely gorgeous, it has nothing worthwhile to it to even exist as a movie. Sometimes it felt like I was sitting through a migraine-inducing commercial of Camp Coral, and other times it felt like I was just watching a really long episode. Not to mention, most of it feels like a time waster. The weird dream sequence literally goes on for 15 minutes, and by the time SpongeBob and Patrick do get to Atlantis, there's 50 minutes of the movie left, meaning the rest of it is filled with unfunny gags and padded out scenes that don't need to be in the movie to begin with. And even the parts of SpongeBob meeting Gary do nothing for me, since it was clearly stated in the show that he got Gary at a pet store. Spin-off or not, it's still tied in with the main show, so I'm not going to forgive it. Actually, none of the Camp Coral stuff did anything for me. It's so by the numbers and Stray that it leaves me with no emotional impact. This isn't cute, it's fluff. I think I felt more emotion with Wonder Park than I did with this crap. And what in God's name is Mr. Krabs doing there? He's one of the oldest characters on the show. He literally opened up the Krusty Krab when SpongeBob was still a growing womb. You can't sit here and tell me SpongeBob gave Mr. Krabs the idea to open the Krusty Krab when he previously said he was a lot older than this. And that's topped off with this really out of place moral where SpongeBob doubts himself and his friends tell him that he's had an amazing impact on their lives. This has nothing to do with the Gary being stolen plot, doesn't even show SpongeBob at his lowest point for it to feel earned, and they already mocked this in the movie, so why are we now supposed to care about it? You can't just poke fun at the first movie and expect to do the same thing but 10 times worse. This movie is a mess. It's absolutely terrible. The worst of 2020 by far. Yeah, even worse than Trolls World Tour, because at least that movie knew how to take itself seriously and provide some actual human depth. Wasn't a lot, but at least it did try a bit. Sponge on the Run is just an hour and a half of boring, worthless, obnoxious, padded out crap. I know some people like it, but personally, I would drown this filth as quickly as I can.